Snow moves across the northern plains like something alive, rolling and drifting, piling against nothing. There are no houses here, no roads, no signs that anything human has ever existed in this place. Just white, and wind, and a sky so gray it looks like the world forgot to finish itself. The temperature is 40 degrees below zero. At that cold, exposed skin begins to freeze in under 2 minutes. An unprotected human being loses consciousness in less than 7. And yet, something moves. A thin line of smoke, curling upward from the earth itself. Not from a chimney, not from a building, from the ground. From what looks, from a distance, like nothing more than a gentle hill dusted with snow. 20 feet below that hill, a fire is burning, and around it, children sleep on blankets of fur, their breathing slow and even. A grandmother stirs something in a clay pot, the sound of it soft against the crackling of the flame. The air inside is warm enough to sit without a coat, warm enough to think, warm enough to live. Outside, the kind of cold that kills is doing exactly that, killing everything exposed to it. But not here, not these people. These were the Native Americans of the northern plains, and they had been surviving winters like this for 10,000 years. Not with furnaces, not with fossil fuels, not with anything we would recognize as modern technology. And that raises a question that should stop you cold. What did they know that we have forgotten? The answer, it turns out, is not about fire. Fire is just the beginning. The real answer is something far older, far quieter, and far more powerful than any flame. To understand how they did it, you have to understand something about the ground beneath your feet, something most of us never think about, because we stopped living close enough to the earth to notice it. Soil does not behave like air. Air is restless. It loses heat the moment wind touches it, the moment temperature shifts, the moment a door opens. But soil is patient. It absorbs warmth slowly, holds it quietly, and releases it even more slowly. 3 feet underground, even when the surface above is locked in ice, the earth stays near 50 degrees Fahrenheit. Not warm by modern standards, but warm enough to be the difference between living and dying. This principle has a name: thermal mass. And the simplest way to understand it is to think about a root cellar, the kind your great-grandparents may have used to store vegetables through winter. In summer, it stays cool without any refrigeration. In winter, it stays above freezing without any heating. The earth around it does all the work, buffering temperature extremes the way a thick wall buffers sound. Now imagine not just storing your food there, but building your entire life inside that principle. That is exactly what these builders did. And here is what makes it remarkable. The modern passive solar homes we celebrate today as architectural innovation, the ones featured in design magazines and sustainability conferences, are built on the same thermal logic these people understood and applied 8,000 years ago. We gave it a new name. They just lived it. What makes this even harder to dismiss is the scale of it. 82 pre-industrial cultures across 6 continents, from the Arctic to the Andes, from ancient Japan to the steppes of Central Asia, independently arrived at the same solution, not because they were in contact with each other, not because one civilization copied another, but because the earth itself is a patient teacher, and anyone who listened closely enough heard the same answer. But knowing the physics is one thing. Building it with only stone tools, stripped timber, and human hands, in the middle of a killing winter, that is another story entirely. On the northern plains, the Mandan people turned that understanding into architecture, and the first thing you need to know is who built it. In a world where men hunted, women built civilizations. Mandan women directed every stage of construction. They chose the site, marked the circle in the prairie sod, decided the dimensions, and supervised the raising of every post. The lodge belonged to her. When a couple married, the husband moved into her home. When decisions were made about the structure, her word was final. Every beam placed was her decision. This was not a shelter thrown together out of desperation. This was a home designed by someone who understood exactly what she was building and exactly why. The lodge itself began as a shallow pit, sometimes 60 feet across, dug into the earth to take advantage of that stable underground temperature. 4 massive cottonwood posts, each nearly a foot thick and forked at the top, were planted at the center to form the structural core. Around the perimeter, smaller posts were driven into the ground, and across these, willow branches and layers of prairie grass were woven into a sloping dome. Then came the layer that made everything work, a full foot of packed earth and sod heaped onto the entire roof until the structure disappeared into the landscape. Over time, grass grew over it. Bison grazed on top of it. From any distance, it looked like nothing, like a hill, like the earth had simply risen slightly in that one place and gone on with its business. Inside, the design solved two problems at once: keeping warmth in and letting smoke out. The hearth sat at the center of the floor, directly below a circular opening at the highest point of the dome. Smoke rose naturally toward that hole, drawn upward by the heat of the fire itself. But the more elegant problem was airflow. Cold outside air needed to reach the fire to keep it burning, without gusting across the floor and chilling everyone inside. The solution was the entry tunnel, a low, narrow passage 6 to 12 feet long, always oriented to face south or east, away from the prevailing winter winds. Cold air crept along the tunnel floor, moved low toward the flames, was consumed and heated, and rose as smoke through the apex. No fans, no bellows, just convection doing what it has always done, guided by people who understood it completely. Imagine the first night a family slept inside one of these lodges. The fire was small. Outside, the wind was screaming across the open plains, and nothing moved. No draft crossed the floor. No cold crept through the walls. The earth simply held, the way it had always held, steady and patient and warm. Further north and west, in the river valleys of the Plateau region, the interior Salish and Sahaptin peoples solved the same problem by going deeper. Their pit houses were dug 6 feet into the ground, not just a shallow depression but a genuine underground room, with walls of earth on every side. Early designs were entered through the roof, a notched log ladder descending from a hole above the hearth, so that the act of coming home was also the act of descending into warmth. Later builders added side tunnels for easier access, and with those tunnels came a refinement so practical it is almost startling in its simplicity. A deflector wall, a low barrier of stone or compacted earth, was placed between the tunnel entrance and the fire. Incoming cold air hit the wall, split around it, and was drawn smoothly toward the flames, without ever blasting directly across the people sitting beside them. That deflector wall is the same aerodynamic principle used in modern HVAC duct design. It just took industrial engineers roughly 1,200 years to arrive at what a plateau builder solved with a flat stone and a clear understanding of how air moves. But the Mandan and the Plateau peoples, extraordinary as they were just the beginning. Further south, a civilization had been quietly refining all of these ideas into something that would not be matched by the outside world for over 1,000 years. By 700 CE, the ancestral Puebloans of the American Southwest had taken everything the Mandan and Plateau builders understood and pushed it further than anyone had imagined possible. And to appreciate what they built, you need to place it in the context of the world around them at that exact moment in history. In 700 CE, Europe was in what historians call the early Middle Ages. Frankish lords and Anglo-Saxon chieftains were heating their great halls by burning wood in open fire pits on the floor, with smoke drifting upward through a hole in the thatch above, losing more than half of every fire's heat directly to the open air. They would not develop the enclosed chimney fireplace for another 300 to 400 years. Meanwhile, in the high desert of what is now New Mexico and Colorado, Puebloan engineers had already solved the equation completely. Their pit houses included dedicated ventilation shafts, narrow tunnels carved deliberately into the side wall of the pit, angled to open at the surface above. Cool outside air descended through the shaft, struck a carefully placed deflector stone at the bottom, and was redirected smoothly toward the hearth. As the fire consumed oxygen and produced heat, that heated air rose and exited through the roof opening above, creating a pressure difference that continuously pulled fresh air down through the ventilation shaft to replace it. The result was a system in permanent, self-sustaining motion. Oxygen flowing in, smoke flowing out, warmth staying exactly where it was needed. No moving parts, no maintenance, just physics, understood so deeply it had become architecture. But what these people built was never only about physics. Step inside one of these structures in your imagination and look at what surrounds you. The fire burns at the center of the floor, the same position the sun holds at the center of the sky. The smoke hole opens directly above it, a circular window to the heavens. And there, carved into the floor near the hearth, is a small, deliberate hole called the sipapu. To the Puebloan people, the sipapu was the portal through which their ancestors had emerged from the underworld into this world. It was not decoration, it was cosmology built into the floor of a house. They did not just build a warm room, they built a universe. Every family that cooked beside that fire, every child that fell asleep in that warmth, was living inside a creation story, held simultaneously by the earth below and the sky above, connected by smoke and stone to every generation that had come before them. That knowledge, how to place the shaft, how to angle the deflector, which wood held heat longest, which prayers were said when the center posts were raised, was carried not in books but in people. Grandmothers taught granddaughters. Mothers showed daughters where to dig, how deep, which direction to face the opening. The knowledge lived in hands and voices, and the specific weight of a particular kind of soil pressed between a woman's palms. And then, within 2 generations of colonization, most of it was gone, not lost to time, not forgotten gradually, the way languages fade. Erased, deliberately and systematically, along with the communities that held it. Centuries of engineering wisdom, of thermal understanding, of a relationship with the earth so precise it had kept entire civilizations alive through conditions that should have been unsurvivable, disappeared in the span of a single human lifetime. But some of it survived. Fragments, structures still standing in the desert, oral histories passed in secret, and what survived might be the most important thing our modern world has not yet had the humility to learn. The Mandan, the Plateau peoples, the Ancestral Puebloans, they were not exceptions. Across the entire pre-industrial world, 82 distinct cultures on 6 continents arrived at the same fundamental answer to winter's most brutal question. From the sod houses of Iceland to the Yaodong cave dwellings carved into the lowest cliffs of northern China. From the underground roundhouses of Iron Age Scotland to the subterranean shelters of the Andean highlands, none of them were in contact with each other. None of them read the same texts or followed the same tradition. They simply paid attention to the same earth, and the earth gave them the same answer. That kind of convergence is not coincidence. It is truth. Today, passive house design is one of the fastest-growing architectural movements in the world. Engineers and sustainability researchers describe it using terms like thermal mass, earth sheltering, natural ventilation, and passive solar gain, presenting these ideas as the frontier of modern building science. And they are right that these principles work. What they rarely mention is that every single one of them was already perfected by people working with stone tools and stripped timber, thousands of years before the first architectural school ever opened its doors. We did not discover these principles. We rediscovered them, and we gave them new names so we could feel like we invented something. When spring finally came to the northern plains, families climbed the notched log ladder and stepped out through the roof into daylight. They stood on top of the lodge that had held them, on top of the earth that had been their shelter, their insulation, their warmth, and they blinked in the sun. The ground had kept them alive, again, as it always had, as it was always going to. Think about that smoke you saw at the very beginning of this story, rising from what looked like nothing, curling up from a hill in the middle of a frozen plain. Now you know what it meant. It meant that someone understood something, profound enough to trust their life to it. They did not survive winter by conquering it. They survived by understanding it. And there is a difference, a very important difference, between enduring something and learning to move with it. That difference is 10,000 years of knowledge, passed from grandmother to granddaughter, pressed into soil and timber and stone. And it begins, as all real wisdom does, beneath your feet.